Architects, building professionals, and those of you with upcoming projects seeking to build with healthy, sustainable building materials made with hemp, welcome to the podcast. For today's construction projects, building healthy and sustainable are two primary motivations in addition to just form and function. I'm fond of saying that hemp building materials check all the boxes. Enjoy the many episodes of our podcast in this format and our online community for professional engagement and collaboration. Discover hemp as a choice in your next successful project. If you're gaining continuing education credits from this podcast, follow the instructions on our Hemp Build community in the links provided. Now, let's welcome this episode's guest.
Yeah, so my name is Eric Milburn. I'm the principal builder, owner, and co-owner and founder of Healthy Hemp Homes. So we are a full-service general contractor business in the Denver metro area, and I have a background in home building and event planning, as well as project management. I was kind of working in events before the pandemic, and then the pandemic sort of put a kibosh on all events. So I switched into the construction world, started learning general carpentry, building. That's where I found an interest in Hempcrete building. My grandmother came back from a trip from Laos and Cambodia and noticed that they were building with Hempcrete homes there. Not only building, but had seen homes built half a millennium ago that are still standing today. And so that kind of piqued my interest of like, okay, if we can build homes that last 500 to 1,000 years, why are we building homes the way that we are today? And so that kind of started my journey in the world of Hempcrete. My dad and I went over to a workshop up in Fort Collins and was first kind of got our hands on Hempcrete as a building material. This is back in 2019. And ever since, I just said, I have to learn the science of home building and construction in order to even approach this industry, because it is very dense and it needs a lot of kind of delicate touch to it. So started working in carpentry, then that evolved into project management. And now we finally have our first contract for a hemp home in Littleton up in the foothills, kind of overlooking the Front Range. And we're really excited. We're already underway. We have the ground torn up and excavated, graded. And yesterday I just met with some contractor for foundation work as well as some septic. So we're kind of going through all the general construction stuff before we touch on Hempcrete. But that's a little bit about me. I'll turn it over to my co-owner, Tanner.
Hey, thanks, Eric. My name is Tanner Bowman. I grew up in construction. My dad and grandpa and great-grandpa were all carpenters, so kind of just fell into that business. I love working in the sustainability aspect of it. I think that Hempcrete is definitely new to me and new to my family, but growing up in Colorado, we've always been, seeing the sustainability really come to life, and how Colorado has changed from, burning all their trash in the early 1900s to getting rid of that and kind of going to more of a healthy living style. And I think that's really important to me. And it's really nice being partners with Eric, because he knows so much about Hempcrete, and I'm really excited to do my first project, which is this big custom home in Littleton. So that's going to be pretty fun. Kind of coming from that carpentry background, I'm excited to work with the more custom aspects of it. I don't know a lot about any of the Hempcrete stuff and a lot of the history of that, but it's cool to learn, and I'm excited to be on this show. So thank you for having me on here.
I'm David Milburn. I'm in my 60s. Went to the University of Minnesota School of Architecture in the 70s. I've been doing this for a long time. I have had the honor of having multiple clients, some of them with plenty of money, others without. And we explored in New Mexico several different alternative construction types. And we actually had to sign waivers to the county so that, they were not liable for anything that would happen to the buildings. But we've done adobe, rammed earth, straw bale, intergrid, and pumice-crete. Now they don't strip mine pumice-crete anymore, but it's we've had a go around all the different interesting technologies that make homes a little bit more sustainable and a little more carbon free. So in 2018, Eric and I learned about hemp and participated, got our hands into it. A piece of it fell in my mouth. Didn't taste bad. And I also have a heart for our clients and what they're asking for. And that's really paramount, that you listen really, really carefully to what they're asking for. I had an attorney from Detroit that wanted the most spectacular house in Santa Fe, and he said he likes curves. So we made a house that was made of nothing but curves. That it was like a bubble diagram that turned into a house. It was circles and so forth. And we just had a blast. That particular house, funny story, they had a parrot on the porch, and it was right near a tee box. And anytime somebody would tee off and swear, the bird would repeat the swear word. So one golfer figured out, if I tell the bird, don't swing in my backswing, it's quiet until the ball hits the club and makes that crack, and the bird goes, nice shot. So there's tons of fun stories for all these different clients. And I just feel so fortunate that I have this brain that can listen to people, what they're asking for, what they're describing, and it puts an image in my head. It's really unnerving sometimes, but those images kind of organize themselves in what my professor said was a black box, meaning my head. And he wanted to see the step-by-step process, but I tell you, it came together. And every time that clients are doing that, I see it. Not that it's necessarily in a floor plan, but I see the images of the spaces that they've been describing to me, just like they see them when we go through a guided imagery session. So it's been an unusual architecture career, I have to admit. And I've done projects in Scotland, China, India, New Mexico, Minnesota, Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin, upper Midwest. So I really do feel lucky, and I'm so excited that my son switched from white collar to blue collar, and it's a blast working on these buildings together.
I love that story, and I love how you emphasize the importance of listening. A lot of times we're moving fast in this world, and we don't take time to listen to what each other are saying. And I enjoy you being able to celebrate having a non-ordinary architecture career. I don't know any architect that wants to go in and be an architect to have an ordinary career. It's a very creative, that's a blessing and a curse sometimes, but it's nice when the creative types get the opportunity to create. And I love how you were telling me about the house with all the curves. My brain, as far as somebody who might be in the potential avenue of delivering that type of build, cringes at those stories, because it's now you have to build the curve and all of those things, but it is a blast when it all comes together. We've talked about the origin story of how you came into this space as a professional, being a practitioner in the space, but then also the genesis of the projects. And so architects are called on quite often, and then that's the primary audience for this podcast, are called on to be healthy and sustainable. And those are two big driving motivators on that. Tell us a little bit about the genesis of this project that you've got coming up, and any experiences that. Was it a design professional like an architect or an engineer, or was it a homeowner that wanted to build something that they had found? Was the Hempcrete material selection discovered? And then what were those early on professional engagements when everybody was just kind of unpacking it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So with this particular project, the homeowner had knowledge and experience with Hempcrete before. They had done their own research. They wanted always to build a home that was healthy, natural, and sustainable. And they came across Hempcrete in their own research, and started looking into local contractors, local builders. And that's when they came across my website and reached out to me. And this was, I want to say, 2 years ago. And then I connected them with my dad. So they had the knowledge first, then they kind of leveraged the skills of my dad to help bring their vision to life with the creation of the design. That being said, that is probably the hardest hump to kind of cross, which is the education factor. A lot of customers, a lot of people that I interact with, both in the construction world or just in the world in general, have no idea what hempcrete is. It's just kind of always opens their eyes a little bit when I start talking to them about this alternative. A lot of people kind of know what straw bale is because it's been on the scene for many decades, but hempcrete is just kind of now coming onto the scene in more abundance. And so a lot of people that will reach out to me and my company is because they already were introduced to it, whether it was a YouTube video, it was another contractor, somebody else that they had had a previous relationship with. But with this particular project, it was, they had knowledge, and then we kind of took the design. In the future, what we're hoping to do is widen that top of the funnel with people that have no idea what hempcrete is, but they want to build a house, they want to be more sustainable, and then introduce them to hempcrete. That way we have a bigger net to kind of capture the wider population on hempcrete itself.
And it'll be just a simple material selection. You've got options. You've got fiberglass bats, you've got spray foam, you've got hempcrete, pick, and then there's other options along the way, but it'll definitely make its way to just ordinary daily selection. Now, shout out to the straw bale community. They did a lot of the heavy lifting on drafting some of the concepts that are in code now. I want to give credit where credit is due on that, and those natural building professionals. And where that has manifested itself is in the IRC 2024 Appendix BL. So if anybody wants to take pause and find that, then that's where this is now supported in code, to where if you're a professional, you don't have to wonder what you can can't do. This is something that is supported by that structure. And so now the early adopters have gone in, like the straw bale community, like the Hempcrete and other natural builders that came in and had all these different material selections. Now this is codified to where it can take place and that professional engagement can happen. And so the customer that was they did their own research and they discovered. And then this is one thing that I like to discover as far as what made you go from being closed to it and just hearing about it. And then, because if we're going to put up a construction project, we want to prevent any of those headaches. And this will be some sort of discovery. What were some of the transition points to where you collectively became open to it? What were the curiosities of engagement to where, hey, this is something we should do for a customer and a client where we won't be at risk?
With this, how do I put this? In the past, when I was a subcontractor for Hempcrete, the owners of the previous customers were also interested in Hempcrete. There were no general contractors that kind of serviced them. They were their own general contractor and had to work on those transition points, hiring out the subcontractors. And that just is the general world of like the network of Hempcrete building right now. It's hard to kind of climb that into how do we change the construction industry where this becomes the norm.
I know a lot of professionals have that. You have to be very cautious when doing something new, because you could try to innovate and definitely have a lot of hardship and a heartache along the way. What were some of the key components where you went from having a highly supportive to the point of being passionate customer, and then that customer wants it, and then they want it a lot, and they're willing to overcome some of the discovery phases to it? So that openness on the customer point, and that's something that is very unique about Hempcrete and these building material systems, is that it draws in passionate customers, people who not only want it, but they really want it, and then they know why. So they show up quite often full of vigor. And then now the professionals need to go, okay, pump the brakes for a second. Let us make sure that we can deliver that. When you went from what is it to, yes, we can deliver that, tell anybody who's making those professional considerations some of your key points in that process.
It's kind of a difficult form to communicate to customers that you are an early adopter, and there's a nature to being an early adopter, meaning that you are taking on this risk because there isn't a lot of precedent in the past. However, there are a lot of bright minds behind this movement that you can put your trust in. There's smart engineers, there's brilliant architects, and there's builders kind of willing to ensure that we are doing everything up to code. But the support of putting Hempcrete in the IRC book kind of legitimizes the movement a little bit more and opens it up to a wider audience beyond just those people that are the early adopters willing to take that risk for their home. But there's elements to Hempcrete that just sort of sell themselves: fireproof, mold-proof, pest-proof. One of the best performances in the market when it comes to heating and cooling your home and keeping a nice ambient temperature. These things are not really widely accessible in the general construction world. Tanner and I used to work for a general contractor in Denver as carpenters together. And so the materials that are put onto the market now, they're of a lesser quality than they were 10, 20, 30 years ago. And it continues to go down. And so we want to rise above that with from a building perspective. But for all customers, there is a risk that they take. But we are trying to be stewards of that risk to make sure that they not only have the best house in their neighborhood, the best house in their state when it comes to beauty, architecture, design, performance, all the above, so that we are setting the precedence for the rest of the century for construction, which is a really exciting part to be in.
There's definitely some excitement in the industry. And then one of the things that I like to explain to any professional that's going to come into the space is you don't have to relearn your entire trade and profession. And so you have to modify what you have already learned to adopt something that is familiar to you on an ongoing basis. And so I guess what I'd like to do is unpack a few of those things that you saw that were different from the old way it's done, we'll call it conventional construction, to maybe some natural building components that you saw along the way, to what is the application here. And then what that'll do is that'll transition us into that pre-construction collaboration that I would argue is mandatory, or else each of those interests, and that's one of the things that I'm most excited about this podcast, is that each of those interests can make it difficult for the other. The architect can make it difficult for the subcontractor. The builder can make it impossible. And so everybody can cause problems for one another if you don't do that early on collaboration. And so we'll get to that in a little bit. But Tanner, you want to jump in and go over some of the things that you saw that were different from maybe traditional framing and traditional installation systems and products that you've seen, and then how that transitioned into the utilization of Hempcrete?
Definitely. Growing up, as a son of a carpenter and general contractor here in Colorado, my dad always used the standard framing, 16 on center, and then bat insulation, and then just siding and drywall on the inside. That's standard, and it's been like that for, 100 years or something. And learning this new thing, even talking to him, he was really excited because getting rid of all those subcontractors and methods, it actually puts less strain on us as a general contractor to just have, instead of having 4 subcontractors coming in and doing siding and insulation and drywall and all this stuff, we just have one team come in and get to do all the Hempcrete, and it just creates this beautiful product. And it's also sustainable, and it helps the environment, which is really big right now. And we definitely really care about seeing that transition was really cool. And I'm really excited to actually work with the Hempcrete builder and learn, because we're going to be hiring a subcontractor. I know Eric can do it mostly by himself, he says, but we're excited to work with him. And yeah, transitioning into it, I think, has been pretty easy for me personally, because I'm working with a team that's really passionate about it, and the client is really passionate about it. And that has caused me to have a lot of passion about it as well. When I met Eric a few years ago, one of the first things he told me about was Hempcrete. And ever since then, I've been really trying to learn more about all different types of sustainable practices, like composite decking and where that's coming from. That's another big one that's trying to be sustainable, plastic wood and recycled plastic wood and all this kind of stuff that's, they're trying in that industry, but they're definitely not anywhere near what Hempcrete is in the sustainability aspect and carbon negative. So that's pretty cool. When we talk to our electrician and ask him for a quote, the electrician that I've worked with for years was like, what is Hempcrete? Had no idea. And once we explained it to him, he got really passionate about it. And he thought, wow, this is going to blow up. And so he started learning all about it himself, and he's really excited to do this project with us. And I think he's going to end up investing in Hempcrete down the road.
One of the key words that I've heard all through this conversation so far is passion, and passion is sparked. And I think that's something that I have found almost to an unusual level about passion and sparks. And so here we are on a Saturday taking time to record a podcast about a building material and systems. And so that doesn't happen every day. So you talked a little bit about the difference on, you still frame, it's still framing, Hempcrete's not load bearing, but there's several things that for what you include with Hempcrete, there's several things that you exclude. And so those need to be planned for and coordinated. And then, but other than that, you're still being the professional that you are. There's not a whole lot of huge difference in there. Are there any other key takeaways about how you would like somebody on the design side or the management side to know about on the actual execution side of that? Are there any other points of engagement that you'd like to see from your point of view to everybody with a different point of view?
Yeah, I think that, just from a design standpoint, the framing is kind of important to me. I love personally doing framing, but I want to see not just 16 on center. And David did a really good job of laying out what the framing needs to be on not only a traditional house and what this new Hempcrete home is going to be, but we're debating, Eric and I have talked about it, and can it be 24 on center throughout the whole house, or does it have to be 16 on center? I think that's one of the things that we're still a little iffy about. And then even with this newer Hempcrete coming in with the blocks rather than the packed Hempcrete that Eric has normally done, what does that framing look like? And can it just be 2x4s? Does it have to be 2x6s due to code? I know that the old code, or that the current code for 2x6s is more so a requirement for insulation value. But when we're getting rid of that, are we able to kind of jump through those hoops of going back to 2x4 framing for walls? And so that's kind of something that I'm interested more in learning for design standpoint.
We talked a little bit about what I describe as the cooks in the kitchen that are coming up with those good ideas, and collaboration between actual execution level trades and professionals in that regard, to the design professionals, the architects and the engineers, as well as the builders that are going to manage all of that coming together and all those puzzle pieces. Because you do have things like you sequence it differently. You might do something instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, like what you're used to, and that's the default setting, what you were describing about, in the family business, and that's just the way it was done. You might go 1, 3, 2, 4, and then out of order a little bit, because that's what's necessary.
I was delighted to get connected to this couple through my son, and they were very interested in Hempcrete, wanted to find out more about it and start the design process. So we had a client who really was clear about what they wanted for their home. They've owned the property for many years and have been up there often for camping, and so they gave me almost a floor plan of what they wanted. And then we started talking about exteriors and style and position and so forth, and visited the site. Fairly steep, but a wonderful view to the east. You could look down over city lights and reservoirs in Denver and Chatfield area. So it was really inspiring. And we did something else that was a little bit out of the ordinary. We have a guided visualization imagery session that I do with them, and they go visit their dream home in their head, which they may not have known what was there, but it's a tour that we do, and ask questions and notice this and notice that as we're going through it. So when they come back into a little bit more consciousness in the room, I have them draw something on paper, and she drew the floor plan almost exactly the way it was in her head that she had shown me before. And he drew 3D images of the the living room, main space of the house, looking out onto the deck. So I got started doing the design work and wanted to see if I could share a screen. And hold on a sec. So this is the walk around of our 3D model in Revit. And that's the entry door. They're big Lord of the Rings fans, obviously.
Tanner gets to build that.
So this is their sunroom garden space all year round. It's also his office, and it has pass-through windows to the kitchen. This is the kitchen sink window. This is the living room, and we're not able to see through these pieces of glass right now. That's the deck that faces east. This is the deck that faces south. They've got a hot tub there and a fireplace on the outside. And this is looking into their living room now. You can see the kitchen beyond and bookcases. This is their master suite. That's between the vanity sinks. That's the shower window. There's a little shower window in here. That goes into the walk-in closet. This is a nook that they envisioned at the end of a hallway that has bookcases on both sides, and it's kind of an elliptical shape to enter that space, and it's soft and has this round window with a big slice of a tree in it. So that was their envision, and then we built this together in 3D, and we're happy to get it going into the ground and coming out of the ground. So it's kind of our design process that we had for them. I think it's kind of unique, but it's worked for many clients that we've done in the past. I learned this back in the 80s.
I love it how the architect introduced and the design professional introducing themselves and their role and their passion is you bring it home with the visual. And that's where it goes from the phase of ideation and what another colleague describes as talking with our hands to actually having something that we can look at. That's a beautiful rendering of everything and a great illustration. So you had the passionate customer that came in and knew what they want. Now, if you were a design professional and you now know what, and so go 4 projects down the road where you are the passionate one, and then you have somebody who may or may not know, and then this idea is coming out. What are some of the key points of engagement that you would like to advise people in that design professional space that they could share that would spark those passions with the customer and with other people involved in there? What are some of those key components that you found that other people could share?
Sure. So it's paramount that you get your client to take ownership in the design that you're putting together for them. And so it has to be meaningful for them. It has to inspire them on a daily level when they're in the home or the building. And it really makes sense to do things step by step. So the first step is to create a concept with them, check it out with schematic designs that they can read and interpret. We go out to the site, sometimes stand up on a step ladder and hold the floor plan underneath your eyes as you're looking at the different panorama that's there. And then they begin to see their house through different windows that are just on a piece of paper. So then it's, like I said, it's important that they take ownership of the design. And then the next step is to get a cost estimate. So Healthy Hemp Homes and Eric, Tanner, they evaluated what was going to happen out there and gave them a good estimate. And that was the door that opened for them and said, yep, we can do this. So let's go ahead and do the working drawings and get the permit and get it going. So right now we've got a hole in the ground and ready to pour footings pretty soon.
I like that it was the budget phase, which is arguably most people's least favorite phase because it usually is a point of friction. But that's when it became aha possible. And so it's like, okay, we can do this. There's people that know, and then there's suppliers that supply, and then there's professionals that do. And so this all comes together. And so I like it that was the final concluding point and punctuated the sentence on before let's go. Moving forward on this, as far as like taking ownership on all the attributes, and then there's a lot of different motivating factors. And Eric ran through some of these, and then I like to clarify, and I'm guilty of saying fireproof and or whatever proof as well. And so point of technical clarification, and I've been admonished when I post things online and videos, it's I like to precede proof with damn near. And so on a scale of 1 to 10, I think the fire rating's about as close to a 0 as you can get. But we do want to let people know that it's almost bomb proof depending on the bomb. And whatever you're throwing at it, whether it's moisture or heat or any other type of element that would normally wreak havoc on a building system, whether it's the framing or the insulation or whatnot, there is the main rock star, pun intended, is the lime that petrifies and hardens and has all the qualities combined with the hemp material that make it what it is. And so were there any other key attributes, and anybody feel free to jump in on this, that the buyers brought in, the builder clients that brought in, were there any key attributes that drove their passion that they shared with you?
I can speak to that. Yeah, so this particular client is not only passionate about Hempcrete, but they want a home that's completely fossil fuel free. The original plan was to make it off grid, but we kind of pivoted to tying into the electrical grid with solar panels. So they'll still be on the grid for any sort of battery issues that we have, but this client is very passionate and interested on just energy efficient home building. And so part of my day job is working for a company in Denver that does heat pumps and heat pump technologies. So I interact with a big crowd of people that just want their home to be as efficient as possible. So this client is no different. They want it to be eco-friendly, healthy, have no VOCs or limited VOCs of off gases in their home. People that I interact with and I'm in and out of their homes, they care about mold. They care about just the overall health and nature, because human beings spend 90% of their time indoors. And so would you rather spend it in a healthy environment or an unhealthy environment? So this customer, I think, had a keen eye for just health in general and making sure that their home is a good steward for the environment in this world, and having a low demand on the electric grid versus a lot of modern homes that are built. They have a high demand and they're using a lot of energy. And so this is how can we build a home that uses very little energy? That's kind of the impetus with this particular client.
Nice. And so the point that I like to make on all that is there are many different motivating factors. Sustainability and health are two of the biggest ones, but we've seen wildfire-prone areas, and then it's fire retardancy and how it's almost fireproof. Yep. Are one of the big motivating factors. And then I know some of the very first projects in the United States, there's a family that had, sick family members that had hypersensitivities to a lot of the synthetic building materials that are a part of the typical construction phase. And so the point is that everybody has their own motivating factors, and we need to know what those points of motivation are. And then as professionals, we make sure that the consumer knows those points, and that it may not even be a motivating factor to them until they learn about it. And it's kind of like, oh, when you're making a selection between one material or the other, well, have you thought about you are in a fire-prone area? Or have you thought about, you mentioned to me that you had struggled with asthma as a child, and y'all have a small, so there's all those different things to where we discover the motivations, we focus on the motivations. And so that means that we as professionals need to know them and then be able to have those technical conversations when it warrants it. But then what I like to describe is that this checks everybody's check boxes. And it's one of those things that's very exciting, because all of those trade-offs where one is usually in an adversarial relationship with the other, this isn't that case. And so those are some of those things where everything comes together beautifully. Well, let's talk about it all coming together, and then the genesis of these ideas. And you mentioned it a little bit about how this is a very tactile, hands-on material, whether you're talking to another colleague about it and having them come in and having those aha moments that you had, or whether it's a client bringing the idea to you, or you bringing the idea or the concept of the material selection. Whoever is sharing this, it's important to put your hands on it. And then that's something that there was an engineer on a project I was working on, and then we had done some design iterations, and they had done some drawings and stuff. And then I finally went by their office with a mock-up, opened the tailgate of the truck and said, "This is what I'm thinking." And they're like, "Ray, I've never put my hands on this." And I was like, it was a facepalm moment where I should have done that first. And then I've never had an experience where anybody, especially when you mix it up and then manipulate it a little bit. I've never had anybody walk away from that, either as a professional that didn't want to work with it, or as a somebody who wanted their own home that didn't want it. And so that tactile experience is very important. And then the professionals that are listening to this on the design side, reach out to the other suppliers and the other professionals that want to engage that, and then we will get that material to you to get those hands-on experiences, either with a client, to somebody to share, or another design or trade professional on that. Whoever wants to lead the way on the going from Genesis to actual having a project with drawings and executing on that. Again, back to the emphasis that everybody needs to collaborate up front, or you'll make a project difficult for each other in the professional phases. Walk us through that Genesis phase. And then I know sometimes the clients bring it to the builder, and the builder calls the architect. Sometimes the architect is the first one with the phone call. I guess go in order of who all touched this, and then how that came about.
So as Ray was mentioning, everyone has a genesis, an idea, and a plan that they want to have their forever home, ideal home to raise kids, vacation home, 2 families, vacationing in the same location and playing golf year after year. Everything is a unique opportunity to understand your clients, what their wishes are, and then help them get hands-on to it. And as I mentioned before, with the schematic design, trying to get that to fit their ideas so that they have an understanding of it clearly, and then get the budget, we get the project going, and then we take the clients out to their site and we have them help us knit the chicken wire around the straw bales with knitting needles that you push through the wall, and your wife is on the inside, she pushes it back. We also have people setting up their own adobe bricks. We've stopped by the highway side where there's a certain tint of clay soil, and they shovel it into the back of the pickup truck. That becomes the color of the home in the stucco. We've had just a series of experiences like that. I had one couple with 2 daughters, and I said, no, let's involve the children in what their room is going to be like. So the youngest daughter said, I want my room to be near the kitchen. Well, that causes some problems, but what we did was we came up with a secret door that's an actual bookcase that holds cookbooks. And you reach your hand into the bookcase and push it, and it disappears into the wall. There's her bedroom. So she can be right in the room when she wants, but it was, we have a lot of different ways of coming up with different designs. One husband loved to play the banjo, wife couldn't stand it. So we had a secret stairway with a secret bookcase on it that swung open into his sound insulated banjo room. And I don't know. My forte is creative problem solving, and I love getting the problem, and I love giving them options. Well, what if we did that? And then with this client that's doing the hemp home, they went to some trade show somewhere, and they found a slice of a gigantic tree that had a hole in the middle of it, and said, can we put this in the round window in the nook? I was like, heck yeah, let's do that. So when they drive down the hill every day to get to their house, they'll see that round window and that big chunk of tree that's hanging in the glass. I just feel like it's really important that as an architect, you really understand the needs of the client. Same thing for commercial projects. I've done several of those, and we did this house in Middleton, Wisconsin, or not a house, but a commercial building, underground garage, 3 stories, retail on the main floor, office spaces on the floors above. And my client had fairly nice wealthy home builder as well as building development. And I sketched out something that he had mentioned, that he liked the old Midwestern town. This wasn't a Midwestern town. It was all new. So I disguised the building as row houses, like urban row house or row buildings. And he liked it so much that when they put the stucco on this one part of the building, he said, "That's the wrong color. Call David, get the color that he had on the rendering, and that's what we want it to be." He really bought into it. And I'm really proud of all the things that we get to do to solve problems.
There are two main takeaways that I heard from you is that you're a collaborator on the ideation. So you're a collaborator one, but you're an educator. I would take your arts and crafts class if I were going to school and you were a teacher. And so back to the tactile things, from stopping on the side of the road and picking up clay samples, everything where people engage. And so all those different points of engagement and methods to engage. And I always like handing out samples to people. And there was some AC guys, and I gave them a little sample of Hempcrete, and I go, bet somebody in your office lunch that they can't set it on fire. And then I just kind of made a flippant remark. And then I came back 2 or 3 days later, and it's like, man, we couldn't set that thing on fire. And so he got free lunch out of it. And so that's a running joke on things. But those, the arts and crafts activities that you need to plan as a designer and a collaborator that make things real and tangible, like he's going back to the sample that you had. No, that's the color I want, and going from there. So perfect. Oh, Eric, you're up next on the phase of things, and then this will time out perfectly on what all we've got time for today.
Kind of speak from my perspective. I see my dad is definitely the creative, right-brained sort of performer. I'm the left brain, more logistics, get things kind of in motion.
Okay, you got those reversed, Eric.
I thought right brain is creative, left brain.
No, you are right. I'm sorry.
Okay.
My fault.
Case in point. And I feel very fortunate to kind of be in what I've coined as like an artist sandwich. I'm in the middle. I don't see myself as an artist, but I definitely see my dad as an artist. I also see Tanner as an artist in his craft and his carpentry skills. And so I'm more kind of up against the forces of county, city, IRC, abiding by codes, dealing with inspectors, getting the ball in motion. Because by the time the design winds up on my plate, it's a tapestry. And, we have to bring it to life, and we have to put this tapestry into an actual building and make it look like this, and kind of so that someone can occupy it and live in this home. And so with that comes all sorts of challenges. We started dealing with the city, requesting for a permit, getting the designs right, seeking out excavations, subcontractors, foundation. We already put in an order for the big panoramic door in the front. We're in talks with the framing company that's going to do the beams for the roof. So we're very much kind of the pragmatic approach of how are we actually going to put this tapestry into reality. And so Tanner and I are in weekly talks of how we're approaching this. And it really gets me excited, because we've been on projects before where you don't see it, and then you spend a few weeks building it, and you get to walk away with your creation and your sculpture of a home. And it feels really good to actually, put that into motion. And then I'll never forget one house that we remodeled for a company we used to work for. It was so many headaches, so many curveballs, and it was really challenging to build this home. And then I remember we came back after it was done to do some paint touch-ups, and we got to see the family now occupy the home, see the little kids running around. They went into this little this stairway nook that we had built for them. And we're like, okay, so all those headaches are worth it. And, all that building time was worth it to see a family occupy the house. So, with it comes all these extra elements that kind of make it, they don't make it easy. Otherwise, anybody would be in construction, but it's very enjoyable to do that. And so with this house in particular, to see a hole dug already. And yesterday I met with the foundation contractors, and we're having issues with the septic. And of course we're going to have issues, and no house is going to happen perfectly. But it's just how I approach it is just kind of roll with the punches and keep that ball rolling. So that way, our goal is this time next year to have this house completed and we can hand the keys to the customers. I really enjoy this industry. I see a long, bright future in hempcrete construction that we get to put these art pieces into motion. And so I see myself again in kind of the middle between my dad and someone like Tanner, where they're bringing this to life, but someone's got to kind of work with the inspectors and make sure these houses are kind of built to code. And it's not easy, but I truly enjoy it.
It is nice to see things come to fruition to where all the hard work and you get to experience and share the reward of it. Tell us about some of the friction points that you had at the permitting site. I know that's one of the big topics that people ask a lot about when you're engaging with any type of regulatory or oversight, and they haven't seen this before. And then now you're that educator on that level, and then you might have to re-engage your design professional, architect or engineer to have the right proper educational material, because they don't speak arts and crafts. They speak drawings, and then they want to know that something is professionally drawn, designed, and built to where they're filling their role of protecting the well-being of the public that they have that role for. Tell us about some of those friction points that you experienced on the permitting side and how you engaged to overcome them.
It's a difficult relationship, but it has to be symbiotic in order for it to succeed, because these entities exist so that homes are built correctly and safely, and it's very important. And so we have to ensure that we are fulfilling those obligations. With this house in particular, the struggles that we find is that a lot of the building departments in Colorado, I'm sure around the country, are not really incentivized in the way to move projects like this quickly and in a timely manner. So we put in for permit in late August. They said it'd be 6 weeks, which put us in mid-October. We gave them everything that we needed, including updated permit drawings, water testing, all these things that weren't necessarily labeled on their website well enough for us to identify early on, and we only found out about it after they had informed us. So that kind of slows the process for submission. And then once we submitted everything and that 6 weeks came and went, we were asking for updates, more updates, and finally they said, we have everything we need, now it's going to move to building safety review, which we didn't know anything about, and this kind of delays the project. We can dig a hole, but we can't pour form work or proceed with the rest of the construction, which kind of can delay the project and make a customer unhappy, as well as the subcontractors who want to kind of pour before the cold sets in the mountains. So there's a lot of logistics to uphold, and I think the county that we're working with is doing their job. But I think in the future, if we really want this industry to flourish, we're going to have a better incentive structure for cities and counties to move projects like this that are sustainable, natural, and healthy in a quicker manner. So that way we can build more homes, we can influence more lives, and we're not going to be kind of held up by the gridlock of city government. And I'm happy to kind of work with people and not against, but it sometimes does create friction naturally, unfortunately.
And that's where the other supporting elements to the industry, like the IRC appendix that's coming out. Did you use that at all in engaging with these regulatory bodies? Or was it all through drawings and education on your own?
Mostly the latter. We did inform one of the city planners of the new updates in the IRC and the Hempcrete edition, and he just wanted to see that listed on the plans, so we updated the plans and sent it over to him, which in a way helps legitimize our movement. And for him, who's been looking at plans for 40 years, he wants to just make sure everything's done correctly. And so that definitely helps move the needle.
And so then more and more familiarity breeds that mental de-risking of approving those plans and signing off, because it's familiar and it's something that support can go on. Are there any other points of friction or points of engagement that you want to talk about moving from the ideation design to the implementation where the rubber meets the road? Because we're about to jump over to Tanner's viewpoint where the rubber really meets the road and things are actually getting put together, and then they're going to have to go and it's going to actually have to happen. Are there any things that you want to wrap up with on that initial design to building logistics?
Nothing new, but I would just kind of elaborate on the challenges and the stressors involved with getting a site prepared. If a site is raw land, we need electric, we need sewer, we need water, we need all those things that make a home, so that way we all live kind of in a hygienic environment. But it's in order to do that, it comes with it many complications. We just found out, if your septic is too close to your water system, you got to change that. So I think in the future, working with city municipalities to have a more proactive approach, so that way we have maybe a cheat sheet that says, make sure you have X, Y, and Z filled out before kind of working with us. So that way we don't discover it and you have to go out and fix it. You bring it to us because you already know what has to be kind of configured before we submit for permit. And because right now it just feels very, very reactive, meaning that they take a long time, then they send out an inspector. The inspector tells you something you never knew, or they updated the code yesterday, and it makes it more difficult. And every subcontractor I talk to, their lives are getting more difficult and not easier. And it should be the other way around, especially with the advent of AI help and all sorts of things. So if we're going to be building better, healthier homes, it should be made easier for subcontractors and general contractors instead of harder. So that's just my own take on the matter.
Moving forward to the logistics side, and you brought up a very good one, and I know it's one of the key components that you had on not only the material selection, but how that material comes to you. We talked a little bit about hand cast, and I'll clarify that. That's where you mix it on site and it comes out wet, and then it cures dry, and then that's part of the house. And then that involves water, which in your neck of the woods, that involves freezing temperatures a lot. So that's one logistical element. And then you are now moving towards a block selection to where that comes prefabricated, to where if you needed to install that in December, January, you might be able to do that a whole lot more effectively, where you would be completely shut down otherwise. And so those are some of the climate conditions as far as what is your weather pattern in your area where you're building. Any other logistics? And then we'll hand it off to Tanner. And then Eric, you and Tanner can unpack for us your conversation as it started, and then maybe some of those back and forth points and pieces.
To touch on what David had said at the beginning, was that creating a forever home is important. And I think that all three of us have a passion for that. And I think that's really cool. Every time I step into a client's home, just remodeling or even just doing some touch-up work, I'm trying to give them the best, highest quality work and craftsmanship. And that's really important to me. And I think with this upcoming custom home that we started, getting down the road, after foundation lays, once framing goes up, that's when it's really going to start being apparent of how custom something can be and how custom this home is. And, David touched on that really cool piece of wood that they found, and they want to put it in the window that they see driving home every day. That's going to be amazing and super beautiful and really cool to have a crazy, weird, custom circular window with stained glass in it. That's super cool. Custom bookshelves are going to be there, custom kitchen cabinets. So all this really cool custom work is what I'm really excited about. And Eric's totally right that he's definitely in the middle of this artist sandwich where I'm at that one end and David's at the other. But we definitely could not have done this without Eric's professional expertise and just a genius mind for managing and kind of pulling everybody together. He's a really good communicator, and I think that that's something that's really important to have in this industry, because that communication can get lost between me and David, where we both have these creative minds and we're envisioning these things as we're speaking, but maybe I'm envisioning something a little bit different than what David is. And, having David be able to pull or like create a video like he showed earlier is really, really helpful to me to be able to see that before everything gets going. And I know some things will change a little bit, probably. That's just kind of how construction goes through the process. Something just might happen and something might just not work. But as far as the next step in this process, I'm really excited about it because I finally get to get my hands dirty with some hempcrete, and maybe it will end up in my mouth. I don't know. No, just kidding. Hopefully not. So yeah, I think that's it. To touch on how Eric and I just kind of came to fruition through us. We just were both passionate carpenters that met. After about a year of working together, I jumped off and started my own company, and Eric jumped into managing a management role with kind of another company. And then after a couple of years of just being really good friends and doing a lot of carpentry together on our own homes, we got this amazing opportunity to work with David and work with these clients who wanted to build a hempcrete home. And I think I got really lucky. So.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of things as far as setting expectation and sharing ideas about, David was able to, it was either David or Eric was able to make a video. And then that is like, okay, now I understand. And what we're wanting is this library of videos that we're launching right now to be able to be some of those touch tone and reference points. And I know that we've got our earlier interviews with Eric as far as like his backstory coming into this. And so I'll just draw reference to that as far as people wanting to learn more about the professionals in this space and some of the technical issues in this space. But on the framing side, was there anything unique that you saw different about, hand cast versus blocks, or how it would come together? So when it comes to, you're the one who's going to execute the frame, were there any key questions that you had, whether it's, like you mentioned, the spacing, 16 versus advanced versus how much lumber do we include or not include? Were there any components on the frame? Because I know that's where one of the big, you have to give a lot of focus on frame, because once you cover it up or then, well, it can't be accessed anymore. Were there any things that stuck out to you that you had to go back and forth and have some questions answered?
Before Tanner answers that, I will say that the way that the house was designed and currently it sits in our plan set is for the cast in place method, which is, we have it, I think it's 24 on center, but with the switch to hemp blocks, this kind of changes the engineering of the house a little bit and the framing. And what we do know is that it will use less lumber, because now we're building with majority blocks. The house structure itself will be timber frame or just less lumber in general. So we're actually still exploring what this is going to look like. Tanner's a master framer, and I have no issues that with his expertise that we can figure this out. But it does change the design for the better. It's less materials, it's more sustainable. There's no performance loss with the changing over to block. So I think this house will be even one step better than it already was. And I thought it was a pretty great house as it is. So that's the one change that we haven't fully fleshed out yet.
That's a perfect example of the process that goes along the way too, because you have to all bounce the ideas off one another to make sure that it's not going to create a limiting factor. Tanner, any other thoughts on that?
I think that would honestly be a better question for David, because I'm just going to follow his design and I'm going to do what he says. So if he wants me to go 24 on center, then I'll do that. If we're doing blocks, then we can, I'm not sure what we could do, but I think that I'll fall back on his and Eric's expertise on what we're allowed to do, and then hopefully get that building permit passed if we're switching to blocks.
Yeah, and this is the example that I love, and I'm glad it came out so organically, is what other process or construction project has the subcontractor had a direct line of communication with the design professional, and then they can both ask one another, hey, will this make your world difficult, or will this make some, or, does this work? And then that doesn't come around that often. It usually is forced down upon the subcontractor, and then they just have to do whatever. David, were there any points of framing issue that were the questions that you had to answer along the way, as far as regular spacing versus non-conventional versus, I know you've done a lot of curved design, which is it's fun to build, but not everybody might share the fun if they're the one having to put up a curved wall. Any of those stories that you have to tell?
I want to mention that it's really important to have a very good structural engineer with experience in the materials that you're working with. So Crown Jade here in Colorado has Mark Benjamin and his son, David Benjamin, are working in the same industry. So they've done multiple hemp homes around Colorado, and so they did have the experience. And we depend upon them to make the county feel safe that this house isn't going to fall down. The role of an architect is to try and make the building as economical as possible, even if it is a little outlandish. So working with the structural engineer, we're bouncing ideas off of one another, and he was talking about curved trusses with a flat ceiling, and those are economical, easy to build. And I said, well, we'd rather have a curved ceiling with fake round beams looking like they're holding up the ceiling. So how about if we use truss joists between the curved microlamps that would carry the truss joists, that carry the roof and skylights and so forth. And so it was a collaboration between the two of us. And so now this home is going to be made with mostly off-the-shelf components. And we've got a very talented and experienced timber framer that's going to be doing the front porches and some of the porch posts and so forth. And he was also at the Hemp Symposium back in 2018, and so we really bonded then, and we depend upon his expertise and logistics on getting timbers, correct material, honed the right way, on site, in place, and then protected for the life of the building, which is, we hope to be maybe not the 1,000-year-old hemp house that they have in other parts of the world, but certainly well beyond most of their great-grandchildren's age. So, I only had one house get destroyed, and that was by a plumber who fixed the upstairs toilet fitting too tightly, and nobody was home. And we had 40,000 gallons that went through the building. Granted, that's not easy to anticipate, but the house was torn down, and then they rebuilt it, thank goodness. But I've done hundreds of projects, and as a side note, working with plan examiners at different cities, it's really a lot harder now based on my experience. I went into one town in Colorado that shall remain nameless, and I had a question about whether this plan set, because it was one of my first in Colorado, was going to be acceptable. And he looked at it and goes, well, if you change this to 2,000 and not to 4, that'll be good. So he marked it in red and he says, do you want your permit now? So I said, yes. And, things used to be that way. Draw it on a grocery bag, take it to the building department, they'll give you a permit. Those days are gone. And the poor clerks that get hired, they really don't know that much about experience, but what they're reading, and they have some supervisor over the top of them that is telling them, if you don't get this signed off of, then you're going to get fired. So one of these clerks told me that the house was too close to the building. To the road. It couldn't be that close because of the code. And I said, maybe I want to read that code again. He says, nope, this is the way it is. So I had to move the house back 15 feet, which really, it wasn't a very big lot, but the poor guy, he got fired when his boss found out that he was wrong, and it was supposed to be where I had it. Not that I'm that smart, but it just, the poor people that work there at these municipalities, they're really suffering, and they're not very well paid, and they've got so much work coming their way. I feel for them. It's got to be daunting.
And then when you have, AI will help us in a lot of wonderful ways, but it'll also research the topic and write the lawsuit for you. And so when you have all that, well, I love the last example about the barreled roof and how the architectural element and then that desired feature and look was brought together from the framing side to the execution on Eric's side as far as actually making it happen to a different material selection and going through that process. And we'll have some nice pictures of that for folks to look at, because I think it is a very lovely feature and a nice look and a nice aesthetic, as well as a nice function to the home. Any other parting thoughts? What your favorite thing to build with Hempcrete or hemp would be, or what favorite design element would be that you'd like to see come out in future projects?
I want to build
a sauna?
a Hempcrete sauna. That's what I want to do next.
We learned about there's a Hempcrete furnace that's it's basically a blast furnace made out of Hempcrete, and I'd love to see that happen in real life. So that was amazing.
I would love to see a Hempcrete city someday. The whole city built out of Hempcrete. I know that's ambitious, but hopefully when I'm approaching retirement, that's where we're at. But just some closing thoughts on my side. It's an honor talking to you, Ray and Jean, and thanks for giving us the time. It's really like a unique situation here between the three of us with my dad and Tanner. It's a blessing working with my dad as an architect, my best friend as my co-owner and master carpenter in this project. So it's a very unique situation, and I don't know how many companies operate like that. I'm assuming that the mass audience for this will be architects, and so this is really exciting to get my dad's take, because I know he's approaching retirement, and I'm sure in many ways he's glad not to deal with all the inspectors and permits, and Tanner and I have to deal with that for the next 40 years. But there's definitely an element of the artistic work, I think, at play. A lot of homes today, to my criticism, are being built in sort of a bland, austere way. And you'll see these big developments off I-25, and you say, anybody could have designed that. And I think when I look at my dad's houses, I said, no one except my dad could have designed that. It's really special. I think for young architects to try to approach every house with that artistic eye, and then work closely with someone like me or Tanner to say, is this possible? I just had this dream that I could do a curved wall that looks like a snake. Can we try to build that? And then someone like Tanner and I can kind of jump in and say, I love that idea. Let's figure this out together. And I think that's a special relationship that often gets overlooked between architects and builders, but we're two sides of the same coin. And yeah, that's just my closing thoughts for this group.
So
I love it with the wrap up of the whole city. David?
I wanted to mention that this experience that Eric and I took back in 2018 taught us that a hemp building isn't just sustainable, and it's not net zero, it's carbon positive. It actually continues to pull carbon dioxide out of the air as a building, like a plant does, which is really strange. And there's also a program where we're trying to have an entire subdivision or community that's off-grid. And that's another version of net zero, and that's coming. There are ways to, like, this home is going to be off-grid. They'll probably only need electricity if it's been cloudy for 6 months. But I think that stuff is really exciting, because I've had so much exposure to experimental construction techniques that this one really seems like it's going to take hold. And I'm so glad that it was legalized back in 2018. It never should have been taken off the market because it's not psychoactive. It never was. And I'm delighted to find that this is something that is, they say it's mold resistant, rodent resistant, it's fire resistant, and it's all natural. It's a wonderful culmination, I think, of building products that I've had the pleasure to work with.
Yep, the 3 high points are healthy, sustainable, and quality, and you don't always get those all in one package. A wonderful conversation, exciting to hear about. Those whole communities will come together through collaboration with professionals like yourselves, and we're looking forward to seeing it. That concludes our podcast and this recording. And Pay attention to all of the requirements and instructions on the community to go ahead and get those continuing education hours for you. And if you're finding this on YouTube, you can go over to the community, and then that's where you will find that access to be able to get those credit hours as well. Jean, do you have any parting thoughts on this?
Well, I think this is our first podcast in this new series of the Hemp Build Podcast, and it couldn't be a better group because we've got a fantastic looking project, and we've got a company that really has all these different elements together in a on a team. I'm just thrilled that this is our first podcast and that it has such a great company